Today, the government has committed to providing UK Muslims with, get this, £117 million worth of protective security funding over the next 4 years. Don't forget as well, this amount of money is on top of, or additional to, should I say, the £70 million that we have identified for the same reason for the Jewish community. I mean, I've got a few things I want to unpick here. Firstly, how on earth have we got to the point where this is even necessary? And secondly, do we think this money is going to be the answer to kind of calming down the tensions?
It depends how it's spent. I'm very uncomfortable with the idea that this money might be... I mean, it may be that it's going to be spent on uniformed police, in which case I would say if there is a threat, then that's only right and proper, because a state should try to keep places of worship safe. However, if this money is going on private security firms, then I become less comfortable about that, because that looks like you're buying a political favour, because you won't know quite how that money is being spent, and it might just look like a political bung. So I get a little bit worried about that. But undoubtedly, a place of worship should not attract violence. Very opposite. It should be a place of peace.
Of course. Aaron, where are you on it?
No, I completely agree. It's really...
Agree with what?
What you just said, in terms of if the cash is going towards the police, good. I'd be very, very concerned, however, if it's going to private security contractors. It's really not that clear. I mean, some of the money goes on, for instance, CCTV and whatnot, but we're talking about massive sums of money. I presume with the Jewish community, a lot of that goes towards the Shomrim, their community police, particularly in North London. But again, that's not really especially clear. What I would say is, we should obviously be trying to protect religious minorities. And if there were attacks or there was the threat of violence against Catholic churches, I would hope, that we'd see the same thing. But yeah, it should really be channeled into police resources. And of course, the police should be trying to uphold the rule of law and maintain public order for everyone, regardless of colour or creed.
How have we got to this point, right? Because, I mean, this is really, let's be honest, let's rewind. It's reflecting now. We've got this foreign conflict, of course, the Israel-Gaza situation that's now playing out on the streets of Britain. And it's playing out in a variety of different forms. Of course, you've got people abusing each other. Both sides now seem to be getting abused, and the amount of abuse is increasing. Tensions are rising. But also, you've got so many people now that are not connected to either side of this conflict. They're just normal, decent people that are seeing these horrifying images, particularly around children. Those children getting hurt, getting orphaned. Innocent people now just getting bombs rained down on them. So many people are now involved, and I can't see how this is ever going to change, because that conflict is not going to end anytime soon, Quentin. It's gone on for an incredibly long time, albeit now perhaps that escalation in parts. So how are we going to get to the bottom of this? How are we going to make it stop?
It might help after the general election has happened. That might take some of the fuel out of this.
How?
Well, because the politicians might stop playing games with all this. And there's undoubtedly some of that going on. And also the protesters are building up. They're trying to create a bit of noise around a general election. I've no doubt about that. And I used to be sceptical about whether or not people could really take offence at protests, because I believe in the free speech, and I'm a live and let live man. But then a friend of mine who's got a Jewish granddaughter and has got a Jewish daughter, he told me that she lives in Wiltshire, and she's considering emigrating to Israel because she feels she's going to feel safer in Israel. And that was that pulled me up sharp. And I thought, blimey, that is actually happening. That is someone who feels threatened by the protests in London. So I think that the protests in London, of course you've got to have free speech, but you mustn't let it happen to the point where it becomes intimidatory.
Well, there was, you'll know this story by now, I'm sure, there was protests again this weekend, not just in London, I have to say, but you know the story by now, don't you? So many people taking to the streets, demanding a ceasefire now in this conflict. Well, something caught my eye, actually. There was a guy out there, he had a sign, he was holding a sign, basically, I think I can even get a graphic up of this. He basically was saying that Hamas are terrorists. It all got a little bit messy and a bit noisy around him. I've got to say, the protesters around him didn't seem to take kindly to him, I can tell you. Anyway, long story short, he ends up getting jostled off by the police, apparently arrested for assault or something like that, was subsequently then de-arrested. And yeah, it got my mind, because the fella, Aaron, he was just making a statement that Hamas are terrorists. Well, they are.
Yeah, it was. He had a very strong Iranian accent, and as a British Iranian, I have to say we can be a little bit crazy, a bit adventurous. No, but you know, I was going through his Twitter feed. I don't agree with a lot of what he says politically. He's a sort of royalist, Iranian royalist. But he obviously has a right to say what he says, regardless of what he was saying, by the way. Like you say, he's repeating the official British government position.
But why would that antagonise? If you are a peaceful...
Well, he's doing it to antagonise, isn't he?
No, but what's antagonistic about making that statement?
I agree with you, and I also think nobody should be responding in the way that they were, but he's clearly doing it to, as people would say, to get a rise out of people. My major problem with it all is the fact that the police arrested him. You know, people are going to have a bit of argy-bargy. I think that's not appropriate. But the police arrested him for saying something which should be entirely legitimate to say on the streets. And as I say, what he, the sign he had was obviously in line with British policy. Even if it wasn't, even if it was incredibly controversial, I don't think people should be arrested for holding placards. And I think it was a big overstep, but they probably realised they made a mistake.
They did, right, because, of course, there was this massive outcry about this. So the Met Police came out and said they've reviewed all of the body-worn video of this 11-minute incident. He says while the wording on the man's stand was an accurate reflection of the law in relation to Hamas, it was also apparent he was there to provoke a reaction from the passing crowd. The priority for officers was to de-escalate the situation to keep everyone safe, and 10 minutes passed, apparently, with officers repeatedly asking him to move further away, and then eventually minimal force was used to get him to do so. I mean, if that's your definition of minimum force. But the bit I can't seem to get my head around is why is stating this fact that Hamas are terrorists, why is it just a given that that is somehow going to agitate these so-called peaceful protesters?
I was not there. I don't know what was said, and I don't know how it was said, but...
I've just shown you the sign.
But photographs don't always tell the full story. But if you go right up close to someone's face and say something about Hamas, which may be entirely correct, then that might be construed to be escalatory. So, I mean,